Welcome to another AP European History Review video.
Today, we are going to be talking about new monarchies. New monarchies are going to be attempts to consolidate power into governments, particularly monarchies at this time, and to keep power away from the nobles. We're really focusing on France, England, and Spain at the end of the 15th century. You're going to hear a concept called absolute monarchies as well, but we're not there yet. This is just the attempt to gain power, not actually getting absolute power. Meanwhile, this is happening. Eastern Europe is just a little bit too unstable and weak. Their authority figures and their governments don't have the ability to gain any kind of centralized power, and that just isn't going to be very feasible. What you need to know are these 6 main characteristics of new monarchies. So the first one is that the new monarchies are going to limit the power of the nobles. Right? Just a little bit of review. Nobles are these upper class citizens. They're right below the king in terms of power. This is traditionally the way society was run and the power structure. So when that's shifted, those nobles are going to be pretty angry, right? Their traditions aren't going to be there anymore. They're not going to have the power that they're used to. And the nobles and the bankers are going to try to hang on to the old system and resist these changes. And the changes that we're referring to here are called the nobles of the robes. So these are new nobles that are going to be created by the king in towns to increase alliances to the king and queen themselves, right? So the king can just choose who he wants as nobles. All the structure that was in place is upended. The second characteristic is that it's going to create an efficient and centralized bureaucracy and systems of taxation. So laws are going to be written down, they're going to be applied uniformly. They're going to take some power away from the bankers, and this is particularly important when we talk about the Medici family because they were really powerful and they were bankers, and now they have less power. And then thinking back to that same lesson, the Renaissance, Italy had a lot of city-states, right? They weren't unified. The only unifying feature was the Pope. So they didn't have much power in Italy. People didn't like that. So they kind of wanted a more centralized, dominant government to unify them. Coming back to characteristics of the new monarchies, the third one is maintaining a standing army. This standing army is going to be supplied and funded by the state and is going to be loyal to the king. Prior to this, nobles could hire their own armies, but that's no longer able to happen. You'll see that as we get to the examples. The fourth one is to encourage a sense of national identity. This isn't really achieved yet. However, they're going to try to get some. The fifth characteristic is to foster trade both internally and externally. And then lastly, to establish religious control and authority over the clergy. And the clergy are going to be people that work for the church.
Now we're going to get into a couple of examples of new monarchies. Our first example is in Spain, and we're talking about Isabel of Castile and Ferdinand of Aragon. So these people are going to unify Spain while also allowing some separate systems of laws and taxation within Spain. They're going to do this one way by creating a loyal police force by using the local town militia. And they're also going to use religion to control the country. Spain becomes a very Catholic country. They select their own church officials, which is going to give the king much more control and power. They're going to exclude the nobility from the royal council, and they're going to use the middle class and educated clergy instead for their royal council, right? So this is going to elevate people that they want in power as opposed to those traditional nobles that used to have the power. So we see commercial and professional groups gain in power across Europe and in Spain. Another thing that they do is they expel Jews and eventually all Muslims in their country. And this is a big event, a big issue in Spain, and they confiscate all the property of the people who are expelled, which actually increases the money and power in Spain. And one thing to know here is that the Catholic Church in Spain does exist. However, it's going to be under the monarchy's control. So we see the monarchy having a lot of power over the Catholic Church in Spain. Next example, we're going to move over to England and a family called the Tudor dynasty, which has many kings in it. And the first one we're going to talk about is King Henry VII. So here are some things that he does, which are characteristics of new monarchies. One is he's going to eliminate the nobility's influence. So we've seen this in all of our new monarchs, right? The nobles used to have their own personal soldiers. And what King Henry VII does, he establishes the first standing army for the English crown. So the nobles have less power now. He also creates the Star Chamber, which is a special court to control and punish nobles that defied him. You can actually see a picture of this in the top right of this slide. It's a blue ceiling with lots of gold stars in the Palace of Westminster. And here they had secret trials, and there was tortures used to get confessions. And all of this, again, is a way to control and punish the nobles. And lastly, he's going to create an alliance with Spain through marriage. And eventually, this alliance is going to lead to King Henry VIII. King Henry VIII is another Tudor, and he is a really great example of a new monarch. Now, a little bit of background on King Henry VIII. He wants to have a male heir, but he cannot get one from his first wife, so he wants a divorce, okay, which is a very radical idea at the time. Now, he's Catholic, and his wife, Catherine of Aragon, doesn't want to have a divorce, right? So the Pope, he has to ask the Pope, and the Pope refuses. So does King Henry VIII just take that? No. What he does is he uses Parliament to remove the Pope's authority in England, and he declares himself the supreme head of the Church of England. This is called the Act of Supremacy. So this severs ties with Rome and grants him his divorce. This is a pretty crazy thing, right? He's saying, I am in charge of the church. It's a big development with regard to England. Just to continue on this story, he actually secretly got his mistress, Anne Boleyn, pregnant, and he marries her to try to legitimize the baby, which became his second wife, but he also beheads her. He ended up having 6 total wives. The third one gave him his male heir, and 5 of them were beheaded. It's a pretty crazy story, but for AP Euro, this is the stuff we need to focus on. All right. So another idea here is the Treason Act, which makes it punishable by death to deny the king as the supreme head of church. So if you can imagine, there are people in England who are like, hey, you're not the head of the church. What about the Pope? If you say this, you're killed. Right? So this easily puts opposition down. And he has this top-down concept, which is control over religious life, as we see with him being in charge of the church.
And as always, here are the historical developments that College Board has provided us for this lesson. So please read through these. Thank you so much for watching and listening.
Bye!